Good afternoon. It's great to see so many people here today. I've had this role as Commercial Director of Rail and Underground since the 1st of August last year. I have had commercial roles across the Underground for the previous 5 or 6 years, but as Howard Smith let slip this morning, I was a lawyer in a previous life. But anyway, that's now out in the open. However, I'm now one of those people that the lawyers spend all their time trying to keep on top of, but as I did many years ago myself. So, I'm going to share with you today some of the things that we've been doing to try and up our game in terms on the commercial level. Following the McNulty report, everyone in the public sector railway environment just has to get better. And what I'm going to do today is share with you 3 strands of our strategy, talking about what we're doing around category management, what we're doing around supplier relationship management, and what we're doing on commercial management. I'm going to spend about 20 minutes and I won't overrun. When we started off, the first thing we decided we needed to do was to define where we wanted to get to. And we want to be a really good, intelligent public sector procurer. And so we set ourselves the challenge of delivering commercial excellence. But in my world, I think the main thing we want to do is to achieve a real sense of balance with our partners, and lots of history around London Underground and Transport for London of having very sort of antagonistic relationships, and we are trying to change that, trying to get a sense of real balance between us and our supply chain. So, one of the difficult things when we started on this was actually to work out what we meant by commercial, because on one level, what everyone does across the whole of Transport for London is commercial. So whatever David Weboso says is very often very commercial. What Mike Brown says is also can have commercial consequences. But what we're really talking about here, the sort of core activities around managing your contracts from cradle to grave, and also having some things that you do around your contracts that actually make the whole thing work a lot better. So I've got something around 800 contracts to manage, and there are about 200 contracts in our pipeline. Also, beyond that, we have the Deep Tube programme, which in itself is going to be a really, really major programme. So, you know, we have to deliver what we're already trying to deliver well. We have to make sure that we place the contracts that we need to facilitate delivery in the next few years, and then we have to go fetch the funding to deliver the Deep Tube programme. So lots going on. When I started, I got an anonymous letter from a supplier. And it was very balanced. It was harsh, but I think it was fair. And basically, it said the following things about TfL. Not enough urgency in getting things done. Late changes are made in the tender process. The approvals process is slow. Contracts are harsher than the norm. The client is continually changing his mind. And there is poor planning of TfL's activities. They said a lot of good things as well about how we managed it. We managed our procurements fairly and several other good things. But there were some harsh messages in there, which I have since been grappling with. So, in terms of our commercial strategy, well, we are trying to build our commercial capability. Everyone talks about the public sector not having the capability that it needs. We acknowledge that, and we are going to do better. I think it's much easier for somebody like Terry at Crossrail to attract world-class talent. It is much more difficult to get world-class talent to want to do the day-in, day-out job. But that's our challenge, and we're going to get there. One of the things we're trying to do is to really minimise the commercial outcomes that we have across the business. So when I arrived, I found a contract with 900 claims that hadn't had any attention, that were almost impossible to resolve without bringing in massive resource and all the rest of it. Lots of other contracts, we're on top of it. We're using NEC like Crossrail. We've been taking the best out of Crossrail and copying their terms and conditions where we can. And actually, most of our contracts, we're really on top of it. We are on top of all the claims, and NEC really encourages you to solve things as they happen, not wait till the end of a contract, as has traditionally happened. Clearly, the main thing we've got to do is get the best out of our investment. Year in, year out, we spend around 7 billion with our external suppliers. We'd like to get that down by at least 5 or 10%. And I don't think that's beyond our skills. So we're also trying to manage what we do effectively because, you know, if some of our contracts overrun, we won't have an investment programme going forward. We've got to show that we can deliver value for money. And if we have huge contract growth, like was had on the Jubilee Line extension around the millennium, we'll stop investment in transport generally in London. So we've got to do what's on our plate, do it very effectively. And that means we need good relationships with our suppliers. And category management. I'll come and talk about what we're doing in that area, but clearly when we listen to what New York was doing around signalling, that's the sort of thing that will really get our costs down if we achieve it. So, responsible procurement, much like Terry talked about, we also have programs which involve people taking on apprentices, and also we're trying to become much more energy efficient. And we plan to leverage a lot more out of our brand. I don't think we're generating the secondary revenue that we should be doing in London, unlike Crossrail are obviously on it, and as our MTR, I'm sure we can get a lot more out of our brand. Stakeholder management. I didn't put a picture of Boris up here today, but obviously whoever is the mayor in May is going to influence our future direction. And I think it's probably a feature of London as much as everywhere else that you really have to manage your stakeholders. A, to be sure they know what you're doing, but B, to convince them that you can be trusted with their money and that you're doing things that advance their objectives. So, category management. Well, you heard a very good example of what was happening around signalling in New York. I wish we had all the same extinguishers around Transport for London. We have, I don't know, about 35 varieties. We think we're overpaying for our fire extinguishers. We've got 35,000 of them around London. I'm sure Crossrail are busy buying more for us to inherit later on. They all require different maintenance regimes, and we think we can save about 35% on that expenditure a year. It's only 18 million, but 35% of 18 million is worth getting. In order to do category management, you have to be incredibly organised, and you heard what happened around signalling. You have to really present your requirements to the market in a very coordinated way. And you also need to understand your supply chain. I think most fire extinguishers are all made, whatever products you buy, are all made in the same factory in China. So it's tough, and it's one of the great difficulties is, of course, understanding your future spend. It's very hard to work out, particularly when some of the stuff is bought through your supply chain and you never get that transparency or visibility of what you're buying. So we've worked quite hard on these areas. I think the tougher areas like rolling stock and signalling sit behind that and will be in our next wave. But these are the areas where we have made some significant progress. So say on escalators, we've gone out with Crossrail. We bought 107 escalators. We're about to place the contract. And we've got a revised technical specification. We're relying on the industry standard with a few modifications, probably a few more than some might have thought was desirable. But as a result of that, we're actually going to save 57% on the capital costs. That's only for the 50 escalators that London Underground is getting. So all in all, we're saving about 40 million on the capital and 20-odd million on the operating costs. So there's some really big prizes. But the thing I have to say is that this has taken about 4 years to get here. And so it is a very, very tough thing, particularly to get your specifications sorted. The other slightly depressing thing about it is that by the time we've placed this contract, got our 50 escalators, it'll take us about 40 years to get the whole of the underground with a standard escalator. But I'm sure somebody in 10 years' time will invent something different, so we'll probably never get there. So it's definitely a very, very long haul. Managing our suppliers, well, we have been, for the first time since I've been with Transport for London, we have been looking across all our suppliers. When I arrived, we had some suppliers on our key list who didn't work for us at all. So actually, it is very important to know who's working for you, and also to make sure that you're giving very consistent messages across the piece. We're trying to work out how we value what we do in terms of getting benefits out of this programme. And at the end of the day, we really hope to improve supplier performance across the piece. Very often we find that somebody's doing something fantastic for surface, but you might find people in tube lines less happy, or in London Underground somewhere in the middle. And actually what we want to do is to drive performance to the same level across the piece so that we actually have all of our suppliers performing as we wish. This is the way in which we want to promote things like the responsible procurement agenda, particularly taking on apprentices. And we need to stay on this. We need to keep things fresh and up to date, or else we won't be talking to the right people. One of the things I think is most important for us to get out of it is actually improved TfL performance. And I'd like to get a similar letter from a supplier which says something very different. It says that we are responsive, proactive, that we're delivering projects in a way we're planning well, and basically that we are a client that you really want to work for. We're going to have a single version of the truth. Again, it is very difficult. We want to measure our suppliers objectively, and that's really difficult, because if you ask someone after a bad day, they will often give you a very flip response about how a particular supplier is performing. And we want to avoid that. We want to get some more objective measures, so actually we can really say this is what good looks like. And at the end of that, what we want to do is to build a lot of collaboration and trust with our supply chain, and obviously encourage innovation. David earlier talked about these areas of focus, what he calls the delivery zone. I won't go through them again because most of you will have heard what he said, but actually until about a year ago, we hadn't told our suppliers what we really want. So actually, nowadays, I don't think anyone is in any uncertainty, that we really want reliability of the railway day in, day out, and actually we really value works and services that don't actually require planned closures. So we don't want to shut the railway anymore at weekends or evenings to the extent that's possible. So things have changed, I think, over the last couple of years for Transport for London, not least because of the increase in ridership that you've heard about previously. In terms of commercial management, I think quite often people get very hung up on the really interesting stuff and forget about how you do things day in, day out, and manage things properly day in, day out. So we are trying to get better at that. We are trying to bring in consistent processes. We're working with MetroRail on how we do estimating and how we break down our data. And also, we're doing a lot of work of trying to get fit-for-purpose contracts and procedures. As far as I can see, the public sector never detracts. It always adds and adds and adds. Contracts get longer and longer and longer. Recently gone through an exercise whereby we've halved the number of special clauses in our NEC contract. We've got about the same number as Crossrail, and that we're very similar in nature. So we're really trying to slim things down, which is actually quite difficult because every time you look, somebody tries to lob in another clause about X, Y, and Z. I think we got to 370 last year. So, commercial management. You've probably heard David talk earlier on, and he's one of my very demanding clients, and obviously it's very important, I think, to agree where you're going and what you're doing with him and his team, also with our maintenance colleagues, because actually if you don't take them with you, they just go in an opposite direction, is my experience. We're doing a lot of training across the piece, so that we're training across our project management teams, particularly in how to deal with the NEC contract, and we're doing a lot around risk management and commercial risk management. So, where does this leave us? Change is imperative for the public sector. We've got to be better. We've got to respond to McNulty. We're going to build trust with our supply chain, but also building trust with other parts of the public sector. It's been great working with Crossrail on escalators and lifts. That requires quite a lot of trust across the piece, and also we hope to work with other bodies, other metros, Network Rail, and I think if the public sector can actually build those bridges, we should be able to trust each other to go fetch, certain things, whether it be escalators or whatever. Just define the spec and proceed. And I'm going to ensure, if it's the last thing I do, that we do have a bonfire of a necessary process. Lots of things we require of people at pre-qualification, various parts of the tender stage, I'm not sure is necessary, and I'm very keen to cut that down, to cut people's bidding costs, and also to make it a much more streamlined thing. So I'm going to leave it there by saying just keep it as lean as we can, and thank you very much.